How much has U.S. soccer development improved since the 1994 World Cup, and how much will it improve after the 2026 World Cup? Hi, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical TV, and welcome today to an exclusive interview with Eric Wynalda. Wynalda is a USMNT legend with over 100 caps with the U.S. men's national team, over 30 goals, 3 World Cups played in 1990, 1994, and 1998. So pretty much, I don't have to introduce him. If you're a U.S. men's national team fan, you most certainly heard of Eric Wynalda. In today's episode, we're going to talk about U.S. soccer youth development in the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, and now talk about the 1994 World Cup. Gregg Berhalter, yes, we'll be discussing that as well, and the impact of the 2026 World Cup in the United States and U.S. soccer community. Now, obviously, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this type of content. I will not be requesting during the interview, and the only way we can know if you enjoyed it is if you hit the like button. That's the best way to do it, or leaving a comment down below. I promise me and Eric will be in our best behavior during this interview. Probably not. But anyhow, let's bring in Eric Wynalda. All right, everyone, today we have a special guest here in the channel, another special guest here in the channel, Eric Wynalda, which obviously any U.S. men's national team fan should be more than familiar with. I'm not going to introduce you, Eric. So,
okay, look, I don't want an introduction.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's actually my my daughter Blake's. It's her birthday. She's 7 today, and that's a good introduction. I'm a dad. That's what I am today. All the other stuff we do and I do and involvement in the sport, I think today takes on a new meaning. I was up pretty early making pancakes with crushed strawberries, whipped cream, and chocolate chips. Now,
you know, that sounds a lot more fun than being criticized on YouTube by a bunch of guys that don't know anything about soccer, like me, right? Just talking, just criticizing you every day. So now you're enjoying life a lot better.
I know. You see that reaction I just had? That's just so you know out there, Twitterverse. When you say something stupid, this is what you get out of me. What a jackass! I don't care. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there screaming at the rain, and you could take it to heart. You could try your damnedest to try and educate people. You could go that route, or you could just understand what it is. You and I connected because I appreciate what you do. I think the work that goes into this and the research and your opinions are valid. And just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean you're right or wrong. Soccer is all about opinions and decision making on the field. I mean, this isn't baseball. If the ball comes to you, you have to throw it to first base. You can throw it to center field if you want. It's just an opinion of whether that was a good idea or not.
I also like to compare it because I watched a little bit of basketball, and just to update everyone, what we're going to talk about in this episode is the 1994 World Cup and lead all the way to 2026. But adding to what Eric just said, I like to use the basketball comparison. So basketball, if you have a higher shooting percentage in that game, you're likely going to win that game. Right. Because they're going to go in. Soccer, you can have way more shots on target, way more, like 10 more, and you can lose 1-0. Right. And none of that matters. None of that matters. It's an interesting.
I don't know. I'm not to give you a history lesson, but I remember my amateur team in the Lamar Hunt Open Cup that we beat Portland, which was just actually in that same stadium, was in the MLS Cup. And one of the things that we employed was calculated risk. And yeah, they got 43 shots off that day, but they didn't score. And that's because my team was actually allowing them to shoot from certain areas. And they did every time. And our goalkeeper made a catch save or something that he should save. And I remember after the game, so many people saying, "Oh, you totally got outplayed and outshot." And I was like, "Yeah, we won. So what do you want me to do?" I mean, you don't have to go into all the specifics and try to prove to them that you outcoached the other guy. Let them figure that out.
Yeah, I usually tell everyone, especially when we beat Mexico over the summer twice, and yes, they did outplay us over the summer, but not the last game. And I said, there's no such thing as an unfair result in soccer. It's whoever scores more goals. It doesn't matter if you control possession, if you created more opportunities. If you didn't convert your opportunities, and the opponent did, you lost, and it was fair. That's part of the game.
What was the Argentine guy's name? It was the coach of Chile at the time who gave that great.
Sampaoli.
Yeah, you know the story.
What was it?
So he was constantly getting bombarded with by the media that every team had better possession than him, but he was winning, and it didn't stop, and they wouldn't let it go. And so he tells this great story. He just stops in the middle of the press conference after about the 10th time that he's had to endure possession, 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 but he's still winning. He says, last night I went to a bar and I met this beautiful woman around 6 o'clock at night, and we spoke for hours. And we got into 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were still talking and laughing and enjoying each other's company. And then a man came into the bar at about 2:30, took her to the bathroom, and they made love. And he left with her. But that's okay because I had the majority of the possession.
I actually heard that story before.
Yeah, and so that's his way. Maybe it's a crude way of getting your point across, but I think in this game there's so many different ways to play it. There's so many different ways to exude personality. I think the mainstay of my speech this year at the National Coaching Convention will be about just that. It's just refuting some of the things that we hold so dear as coaches, that we believe that we have to do these. This is not the way the game needs to be played. And a lot of coaches out there need to understand that their job is to play the game they're in. And they don't know how to do that. And so, I'm not going to let too much out of the bag, but when we do the speech in Kansas City, I think that's one of the important points I want to make to coaches and who are out there that believe that there's a playbook and you have to stick to it. No, you don't. You don't. And once you understand the personalities of your players and what your capabilities are, the game is so much more fun. And just going out there and doing the same thing every time. When you have a better understanding of the game, you're able to facilitate a completely different style, a completely different system, and the game gets more and more enjoyable, in my opinion. But it's something I love.
Now, Eric, about this episode, the first topic I want to talk about with you is something that I think you're one of the best ones to talk about this. Any player that lived professionally through the 90s and you're still involved with soccer, U.S. soccer has changed a lot since you retired, and it has changed even more if we go back to 94, right? Before the World Cup. So, and you lived through all of this, and you're still living through it, still involved with it. So my question to you, and where I wanted to lead this conversation to, is before we talk about the 94 World Cup, is how do you compare development of youth soccer at the youth level, essentially, right? U18s, to what it was in the 80s to the 90s, the lead up to the World Cup, to what it is now? What changed for the better, for the worse? What do you see? What is your perspective in this?
Well, I think what's unfortunate, is that there's so many people out there chiming in saying that we've come so far and there's so much progression, and that might be a lie. Unfortunately, I think what has happened is that because the sport has grown exponentially, there's more people playing, there's more people making money off of the game. There are more people out there who are would-be experts who are trying to get money out of our parents because they can teach you the game. And we didn't really have that when we were younger. It was a little bit of hope that if you continued to play well, that at some point something good would happen. And I still believe that hope exists today, that you never know who's watching. And one of the the lucky parts of my life was that Ziggy Schmidt saw me play in a high school game. Now, if he never saw me play in a high school game, I don't know what happens to me. I don't know what happens to my life. I mean, regardless I remember the trying to make my own district team in Thousand Oaks, California. And I went to the tryouts. They played me out of position. I tried to do the best I could. I waited by the phone all night for the phone to ring to tell me that I made the team, and I didn't make it.
How old were you?
16.
16.
And I was probably, my opinion, at a stage in my life where I was playing, I couldn't play better than that. It was because of who I was playing against. I wasn't playing against a super high level, but I was really hoping that I was going to get that opportunity, and I didn't make the team. So the first game out of this winter tournament was against the coach who didn't select me to this ODP selection thing, which stands for Olympic Development Program, which could also stand for Overdetermined Parent now, but that's a different story. But this poor bastard was the coach against my high school, and I recognized him. And I scored 6 goals in the first half. And every time I scored, I ran to the sidelines and I let him know. And I was considered too brash. I was too volatile. This guy was like, dude, just stop. I'm sorry. I don't know who, I go, do you know who I am? Yeah, you don't know anything. And I was out of line completely out of line. But all of that being said, as brash as I was and as angry as I was, Ziggy Schmidt saw that game and introduced himself and said, where's your dad? And he said, because I'm the state team coach. And I said, I didn't make my district team. He said, you just did. Where's your dad? And that's how that happened. And then once I made it into the state team, they created an A and B team, and I was able to really flourish, play with better players. Of course, that happens, right?
Dog.
Cash, my dog. I named him Cash.
It's okay.
I gotta get grandma to get him to stop. But it's all, to me, relative, because when you look at how you go about it today. Now, right now, I'm coaching an 04 team here locally in Las Vegas, and it's a good team. And most of my conversations with my players, what they will do is they will tell me, well, so-and-so told me I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, and I'm never that, and I can't do it, and I'm not good enough, and it's still happening. So when you compare the two, for whatever reason, as much as things have changed, they've stayed the same. There's so many people out there who stay negative, and they don't know how to really tap into the talents of our players. I would say that I'm sure that a lot of people would argue with me when it comes to this, but this country does not have a talent problem. We have a coaching problem. We have an identification problem. We don't know, scouts don't know what they're looking at.
Would you agree with me in one thing? Because I made this point a while back, and I got a little bit of hate for it, even though I do know how MLS youth system works. I have worked with Orlando City soccer schools here. I'm aware of how it works. Would you agree with me, even though people have been saying that MLS has been doing a great job in development? I think they're not. I think they're not doing a great job. I think some specific academies are doing a good job out of the 28 teams I believe we have now. We're expanding. Do you think MLS is doing a great job? I don't think they are yet. Could they one day? I don't think they are.
Well, it comes down to a couple of things. Environments are a big, what kind of environment you can put your players in. That's going to determine how fast they grow and how they can really start to figure out who they are. But to answer your question, no, I think we're terrible at it. I've watched it on so many occasions where I think the number one thing that you would have to say about Major League Soccer's MLS Next, this new MLS Next Pro, the pathway that they've created, the academies that exist, those scouts want the work done for them. They don't want to be scouts. And then their network of people is all bullshit. So when these kids finally make their way in, and the sad part is that if you're trying to put a young impressionable 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old player into a professional environment who's completely ill-prepared for this, it usually is you get thrown out, within a couple of weeks and you never got your shot. And I've seen so many instances like this. But the problem with scouting in this country is very simple. The people who call themselves scouts, on most occasions, the level of the game will determine the level of the player. So if you have, it's basically the level of the worst player on the field will determine the level of this game. So if you have, and I've seen this on numerous occasions out in Oxnard, for example, where they have a Mexican league that I like to go, I've said this a bunch of times. I'm like the white guy with a churro and a bad cup of coffee, and I'll sit there at 8 o'clock in the morning and watch one of these games. And there's teams like Durango that from Santa Barbara that bring in guys that used to play in the Mexican First Division, and they mix them in with these 16, 17-year-old kids who's somebody's nephew. And of course, there's a couple of guys out there with a beer belly and a ponytail, and they suck. But that if you don't go to that game, you would have never been introduced to that 16, 17-year-old kid who just happens to be playing in that game, who can't afford club, who's very good. And he's playing in the men's league against men, and he's making them look silly. Now, what we say is, yeah, he's playing against crap. But why not extract that kid, now once you've found him, and say, hey, why don't you try to create an environment?
Now, don't you think that MLS territorial rights hurt that? Because if you own an academy, right? You're Eric Wynalda Academy, and this is your location. Why will you scout somewhere else? Because you're going to develop that player, and he's going to have to go play for the club that, I guess it's like where he was born or something. The territorial rights. I've talked to so many players that it has maybe hurt their development a little bit. I've talked to you on the channel of how it forced Christian Capis.
It's slavery is what it is.
Yeah, Christian Capis had to go abroad because he was developed in FC Dallas, but he had to play for Houston. He didn't want to play for Houston, so he had to go play in Denmark, I believe he's right now.
Right.
Caden Clark had to go through the Red Bull system, but he was going to have to go play for the Minnesota United, even though he never played one game for their academy because they never had one at the time. So I think everything you're saying matches, and I think there's not a motivation to improve that right now.
Well, I mean, to take you back to 2012, I was still working in TV. I had worked briefly with the 2010 team, Bob Bradley.
With your friend Grant Wall?
Yeah, we're not friends. But I mean, honestly, it's kind of like, here's the way I determine, people I want to hang out with. Do I want to go to dinner with that person? Like if I went to my wife and I said, hey, let's go to dinner with Grant Wall and his wife, she would say, why? And I would say, yeah, you're right. Forget it. Yeah, so I would love to have dinner with you. You and I are the same. We're in the same boat here. But look, 2012 was interesting because Andrew Houtman was the owner of Chicago. Frank Klopas was still working as, I guess, a technical director for the club, and we had stayed close. We're still very good friends. He's still with the club, and this is only just a couple of years removed from some of the other things that we were doing, and there was a chance that I could have been the Chicago Fire manager, which I really wanted. I wanted that with every fiber of my being. I really wanted to do that. Javier Leon, who was the GM, had previously been with Chivas USA. We got to know each other a little bit. We started having lunch a lot, and he started listening to some of my ideas. He says, maybe you should be our coach. I'm going to introduce you to Andrew. So we had dinner. We thought about it for about 10 minutes, and then I was right there, and and they just pulled the plug on it. And I don't know what the reasons were. They hired Carlos de los Cobos, who ended up being the coach of El Salvador, who I ended up giving all my players to. But it just pissed me off because it wasn't fair. There was so many reasons why. Their reasoning was, you've never done it before, right? And in that breath, they're right. I never done it before. So what they didn't know, going back to your discovery areas and the territorial stuff, I had created CFC, which was Chicago Fire Club, but it was located in Oxnard. I had basically chosen Oxnard because it was 76 miles away from the Home Depot Center at that time, which meant it was out of their territorial rights. So I had created an off-site satellite academy for the Chicago Fire, tapping in to California talent. What ended up happening is I had to change the name to Cal FC. But Cal FC entered into the qualification process. We achieved qualification, and then the rest is history. We beat a Division 3, a Division 4, Division 2, Wilmington. We beat them 4-0 at Wilmington, and then we beat the Portland Timbers. And everybody was, I thought that this would be a demonstration of that there is a better, not a better way, but there is another way. And there's players out there that we're missing. And a lot of people were celebrating that, but in the end, it amounted to nothing. So I felt horrible for those guys that they had just beaten. I mean, it's the first time in the history of a 100-year competition that a pure amateur team beats a top flight team without going to penalty kicks. Never happened before. So when people ask me, like, you never done it, you couldn't do it, that was my way of saying.
Why do you think it led to nothing? Why did they ignore this?
I think you're embarrassed. And, when you do things a certain way and you're so stubborn about it, it's not the mold of the way they wanted to do it. All those kids that played on that team, well, not all of them, but most of them, they made their way to Atlanta to play in the NASL at that time. And I coached them, and then I was the technical director. I hired Brian Haynes, who became their coach. He was the coach of the year, and that team won the NASL with a bunch of guys that nobody knows who the hell they are. So, and the style of football that we played really was an eye opener. So, and again, I thought, okay, does this prove that I might know what I'm doing? No. So, of course, Atlanta United showed up. The Silverbacks kind of folded their tents and stopped. The NASL is no longer in existence. And I spent 3 years coaching a UPSL team because I still love finding these guys and creating opportunities.
I played a little bit of UPSL here.
Yeah, so it's and there's it is what it is. It's not the best fields. It's not the best facilities. I get it, but there's still some talent out there, and it needs to be tapped into. But somebody threw this number at me the other day. I think we had 114 games with the Wolves, the LA Wolves, and the what they turned into Cal United, which now plays in Nisa, which is owned by the Capriatis, who are great people, and they kept that going. But
yeah,
I don't think we lost. I think we lost 2 games in 114.
One of the solutions I proposed to everything you just said, because I actually...
I lost you. You went on mute for a second.
There, I'm back. So just so everyone knows, we didn't really talk about this prior, so we're agreeing just because we are agreeing. And I have said this in the past. One of my proposals was, why doesn't MLS combine with all these clubs that they're around from different leagues that the US has, the soccer pyramid here, and do something similar to what we have in Brazil called the Copinha. Every January, you have a Copinha where there's 128 clubs, including the Brazilian giants, right? Flamengo, Palmeiras, all those teams go. And
Right.
they play their youth teams in this huge tournament in the country, which it allows the big clubs and all the other clubs to scout different talents from these small areas. But we don't have this in the U.S. And even if they did do that, the territorial rights would become a problem as well. So
Brazil's almost as big as us. I mean, it's a big, and they still figure it out. So that's the first hurdle when you start talking to organizing committees and why aren't we doing more? The first question that people in this country ask is, well, okay, great. How do we profit off of that? Instead of how do we do the right thing for these players, or how do we find the resources? We say, let's create the resources. If we do it, then we're going to do a tournament, and let's cram as many games as we can in and make sure that we walk away with this thing through a tournament or through things of these nature. You have to make money in order for it to happen. And that's unfortunately why some projects happen and some don't, is because, God forbid we do something that would be instrumental in helping players.
Yeah, I mean, they do have to make money at the end of the day. It is a business, but what a lot of these maybe owners are not seeing is Brazil, for example. You spend a lot of money in development and scouting, but then you go and you sell a player for 40 million euros, dollars.
Now, hold on. It's a great point. The system that we have in this country prohibits us from collecting on a solidarity payment or training compensation because the players are already paying for the instruction. So this is the out for U.S. soccer. This is why they don't pick up the phone. This is why Christian Pulisic didn't, in that transfer to Chelsea, didn't have to give money back to Hershey, Pennsylvania. It's because he was already in a pay-to-play system. Now, what is genius by Major League Soccer is that they have created a pathway through the academies and through MLS Next that now that direct line where it goes MLS Next from the youth into the MLS Next academies, into the MLS Next Pro, which is a reserve team, which goes into the actual reserve team and the professional full squad. That keeps it all connected. Which what we're going to start seeing is players who are discovered within the MLS Next youth programs, and then they keep that trajectory going through the system. Eventually, when they do conduct a $10 million transfer fee, that MLS can be on be the recipient of that money. Right now, a lot of free transfers and a lot of money that's gone to waste, and a lot of money that could have been utilized to create the next Christian Pulisic was just divided up amongst the agents.
Yeah, I mean, they're learning, I would hope. But Eric, moving on from that topic, which we understood, and a lot of it, I agree with pretty much all of that. In the solution, like we said here, we don't know the exact solution. There's many different ways to go about it, and probably the way we're going about it now is not the best one. But back to the '94 World Cup, the United States comes into this.
How do we get so off topic? I'm sorry.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I think people are going to really appreciate the insight and the stories you told about it, because you don't hear this very often in the U.S. media, right? It's ignored,
No.
Especially when it comes to defending MLS. Now, 1994 World Cup, the United States is hosting it for the first time, which we're going to host again in 5 years. Well, 4.5 years. We're getting closer, right. Very close. The U.S. comes into this World Cup, and let's be honest here, a lot of the pundits and a lot of the soccer experts, no one expected the U.S. to leave that group with Switzerland, Romania, and Colombia. Right? Colombia at the time was apparently the best team in South America, better than Brazil, better than Argentina. Romania was a very strong side. Switzerland is always a tough team to play. But the United States came out of the group, and not did they only come out of the group. You guys defeated Colombia 2-1. Which was not expected, regardless of the team believing. The world didn't believe it, right? And then you guys go into face Brazil at 4th of July. I kind of want to hear about, because I'm Brazilian American, so I kind of want to hear about that game from someone that played it.
Well, okay, so going backwards, Switzerland, Colombia, Romania. We should have beat Romania. We actually played very well. And, you know, Tony Mueller's decision to not guard the near post was still, it's debatable. If we get a tie, it's still, I think, a fair result. We had a couple of really good chances to win that game. But going into the game against Brazil, being we're in Palo Alto, which was Stanford Stadium, somewhere I was very familiar with. I played for the San Francisco Bay Blackhawks from '89 until I left for Germany. So it's sort of a homecoming for me. And I had to sit that one out. That was probably the worst moment. Clearly, it's still one of the worst moments of my life. But Bora Milutinovic's decision for me not to play in that game because I was too offensive. And then, of course, everything that happened to Tab Ramos. But we went into that game believing that this was a game that we could win, as good as Brazil was, and we all remember their team. Romario, Bebeto, for me.
Dunga.
Dunga was terrific, and you know, I actually entered the game. I think I had to chase Cafu around. That wasn't fun, but
Cafu was on the bench, or did he play?
I think he came in, and then it made it disastrous for me. And Aldair was the center defender, and Tafarel was the goalkeeper. But that game, you know, I think as good as Brazil was, we did not play well in the first half. We made a ton of changes. Kobe came into the lineup. Hugo Perez came into the lineup. I believe Harks had to serve a suspension, which messed us up a little bit. And it just we didn't. And I sat that one out. Oh, at least the first half. And then Tab gets hurt. So
can we just, like, for the young viewers, just so people understand, Tab Ramos got elbowed by Leonardo, the left back from Brazil, and Leonardo gets a red card, and Tab Ramos, I think he broke his jaw or tooth.
No, it was a bone.
Here, right?
You know, but the hardest, I think what people need to understand, and myself, this isn't an excuse by any stretch of the imagination, but because I was being subbed in, I was the only one who saw Tab on the gurney, that he was on his way to the hospital. And I was really, really concerned about him because, it was It was just really, really bad. The elbow hit him right in the spot. You saw his reaction. His hand started to shake. But when he was on the gurney, he was about to get into the ambulance. I wanted to say something to him, and the paramedics and the doctors were like, stay away from him, don't let him move. And I tried to grab Tab's hand, and he moved just the slightest bit, and I got to see the crack separate on his head. And I think one of the things that I don't know the extent of it, but I think somebody said later this, thank God that he did have the crack in his skull, which allowed because if it would have been if he wouldn't have had the crack, it wouldn't have relieved the pressure, and he probably could have died. So thank God he didn't. But the emotional effect that had on us as a group, to kind of take the field and try to not think about that, it was too much for us. As much as we tried to say, well, we were professionals and we wanted to finish the game, it was very similar, if not not different condition, but what happened with Ericsson and Denmark, that was kind of how we felt. Mm-hmm. To see one of your teammates you love, really looking like they're in a bad spot, and we didn't play great. But
Eric, was there some type of anger from the USA
no.
Against? No, right?
No, no, because you could see it. Leonardo was so distraught; he felt horrible, and you could see it. It was real. There was nothing disingenuous about that. And I think the story, which is really interesting, people don't know this. I think Tab can tell better than I, but I think Leonardo took a couple of big fines because he went to Betis and he tried to find Tab, and he knocked on his door a few times trying to apologize. And eventually those two reconciled. I think he sent him away like 3 or 4 times, and he just stayed in a hotel down the street and knocked on Tab's door every day until Tab finally let him in and let him apologize. But I think that wasn't the kind of person Leonardo was, or the kind of player he was. He's not a dirty guy, and I think we all kind of forgave him for that. But there was no anger. We were just really distraught and concerned for Tab, and it was bad because a couple of us were like, "Is he gonna die?" I mean, like we really were having a hard time focusing on the game. And not to say that we lost to Brazil because of that. That's not the reason why we lost. It was a bit of genius from Romario and Bebeto, and a pretty good goal. But all in all, I think that game, man, if we would have won, I mean, that's the only thing you can say at this point. If we could have won, it's all part of our fabric and our history. I think that game is only second to 2002 when Frings handballed the ball off the line and we don't have VAR, and under normal circumstances Germany's down a man and we got a penalty kick and a red card. I mean, we might win against Germany and play against South Korea in a semifinal. So the U.S. has not had great luck in World Cups. We haven't, and that game against Brazil was not our day. It just wasn't going to be our day.
And then what did you feel after the World Cup? Because we saw a big growth. You said that you didn't think that youth development improved so much in the US. It was more the popularity of the sport. And then after the World Cup in 1996, MLS finally had their first season. And the growth, do you think that all the growth we're seeing right now in soccer in this country is still the after effects of that World Cup?
Maybe that was the introduction. I think that when we look at what's going to happen in 2026 when we get the World Cup again, and we actually got to share it, so it's not all us, but I think '94 was a true introduction, and it was introducing the American people to a soccer culture. The difference in this next go is that we have a culture now. We do. Is it really the best culture? Is it comparable to some of the better soccer nations of Brazil, Argentina, Italy, France, Spain? No, I still think that we are in a pocket where we've almost married ourselves to mediocrity, and then we complain that we can't win. But I do think there's enough excited.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, but I think there's enough people out there that are excited about supporting their team, and the punch in the face that 2018 was really was an indicator that we are not all the way there, that there's still a lot of work to do. I just think that there's still big lack of understanding of what exactly that entails and what kind of work is necessary for us to be truly competitive on the world scale.
I think we're getting fans that are much more passionate than before, right? I think at times we see some people in the media, mostly them getting annoyed or bothered by passionate fans, right? Which I understand that it can be annoying, but that's essentially what
Right.
you want. That's what you want. You want. I know some people say nonsense on Twitter, and you just talked about how you laugh. There is nonsense. I agree with that, but these are fans that truly care. They truly care about the results, and that's what you need. You want them to go to the stadium, yell, scream for the team, feel upset when we win, celebrate, upset when we lose, sorry, celebrate when we win.
But hey,
And
guess what? We're still upset when we win right now. Not everybody likes this coach. So
yeah, I mean, I
it's
complain by
okay.
many things, especially during the summer, about how Greg, some of the things Greg has done good, some of the things that Greg has done bad. Mostly of what I complained about during the summer was how we got the results, right? We got the results, and I couldn't question Greg on that. He got the trophies, which is all you want from a coach. But when I went down to review the whole summer, I was like, wait a second. I know he won, but the only team we outplayed was Martinique, that we truly outplayed was Martinique. So I was just kind of like, man, I expect more from this generation that we have of what you mentioned, Christian Pulisic, these players that are playing at the highest level, but they're still young, and sometimes they don't look like a team a lot of the times, and sometimes they do. And I think it's something maybe we just got to accept that it'll happen a lot when you're playing a bunch of 20-year-olds. You're going to look very good at times, you're going to look very bad at times. And then it's up to Greg to manage that and the
Well,
roller
I mean,
coaster
one of the
ride.
things to that point, though, one of the things that people need to be a little bit patient with, yourself included, is that when you play for the national team under normal circumstances, we're spinning out of a pandemic,
Yeah.
which these guys know each other through Zoom. So
Mhm.
when you play for the national team, it's what I would call forced friendship. We all have a common goal. We need to win for our country. What an unbelievable honor that is to be selected to be the best 11 from the United States of America. When you put your hand on your heart and you listen to the national anthem, some guys handle that differently than others. But regardless of where the coach is, the culture that Greg is trying to create is actually is commendable because these guys haven't had a chance to spend a month together. They just don't. It's no longer the case like what we would go through in the month of January and February. We didn't have a league that was playing because we had come back to play for Major League Soccer, and so what that meant was we could take all of January and we could be in camp and we could work together. We could eat together. We could hang out together. We golf together. We were becoming a team because we were almost like a club team. Now, club teams always play better than national teams because hey, good morning again every day for 2 years. I know you. These guys don't know each other. So sometimes when there's that lack of connection, that's because it's just lack of conversation, lack of time together. It's not, and people think that that's gonna just because we train more together, that's gonna equate to being better teammates. And I think the tweet that I sent out maybe closer to 6 months ago is this team is 5 dinners away from being a team, not 5 practices, and they don't know each other. And if you really think of the total number of minutes where guys like like Weston and Christian and Tyler and Gio being hurt and being away from the team as much as he has been, that's hard. Look at Josh Sargent's situation. He was going to be the guy, and now it's like he hasn't been with the team in forever. And it's like this kid Pepe shows up, and everybody said, "Well, he's the new flavor of the month, so we're going with this guy. We don't need you anymore." Who would have thought that Musa was going to be this good? There's a lot of pieces to that where when we look at our team and how it doesn't always look great, that's the hardest part about being on a national team. And if you can't connect as human beings, you're going to have a hard time connecting on the field. So that's why we don't play well all the time.
My main concern with Greg, in terms of that, is I've played pickup soccer here with coaches that coach the Brazil U20s, for example, in club level, and all these guys that worked in the national team and the club level, they tend to say this they all had in common, and you might agree with this. They always said that in the national team level, the key to successful tactics and system that you're implementing is to try to keep it simple. And it goes with what you just said. The reason they say that is exactly what you just said, which is you don't have as much time with the players as you have at the club level.
Look, and as an analyst or as a coach, or one of the funny lines that Einstein once said: if you want to impress somebody, complicate it. If you want to be successful, simplify it. And that's the reality of what coaching is. And I'm glad you said what you just said, because one of my main arguments with coaches today is how much we complicate things. And there are ways to manage and coach players through scenarios without explaining it. Let them learn on their own terms through the environment and the circumstances that you create and manufacture as a coach. You don't have to say to teams or players, this is what we're doing today, and here's why. You don't, because players are smart enough to figure out why we're doing this. But, when there was a practice the other day that I ran with my 04s, and I didn't explain it until after, because there has to be that, oh, that's what you meant moment, as opposed to, this is what I want you to do, this is how I want you to do it, and this is and look at the PowerPoint presentation, and this is your movement, and then and now we got a joystick out, and these kids don't know what to do. They have to they have to act on their own instincts. And I love that the Brazilians say that, because if you simplify it, you are actually allowing the player to express their own personality and put their own impression on the game, as opposed to thinking that they have to do what their coach told them to do.
Yeah,
that's not coaching.
And obviously, my experience with soccer is way lower than yours, way lower than Gregg's.
It's all relative, though. Don't do that. Don't put it on levels. If we played in a pickup game, right, a co-ed. Mm-hmm. Let's say we played a co-ed league, and we got 2 girls on our team, and me and you, and we got some other guy, and we're trying to play, right? The understanding of what the capabilities of your teammates are will dictate how you play the game. So if I get the ball and I know that Stephanie has no left foot, and I keep giving it to her left foot, that makes me a bad player. Yeah, that's on me.
But the way I see it when I'm coaching, especially kids, right? Because kids know less about the game than a professional player, right? A professional player, you don't have to explain to a professional player what a right back has to do. But I tend to go this way. The way I go about it is, off the ball, there's several instructions that you need to do with the players about how the build-up's going to go, how you're going to do in transition, the press. I don't like to give instructions when the player's on the ball. I think when he's on the ball, the player has to work 100 instinct. And at times in the national team, I'm not saying Gregg does this, because I have no evidence. No one said this. It's just something I notice in the games. I don't know if it's lack of chemistry. Sometimes it seems to me like the players are thinking too much on the ball when I notice with Gregg.
I agree entirely, and I see it as well. I think when you go, there's a concept that I was introduced to through the pro course, which is US Soccer's. It's higher than an A license. It's the highest license you can get. But one of the concepts that really stuck with me was conscious competence. So there's 4 different levels of this. There's incompetence, and basically there's, you suck and you don't know you suck, and then there's you suck but you know it, and then there's you don't suck, you're good and you know it, but then you are a good player but you are unaware, which really essentially is unconscious competence. Is what we're trying to achieve. What that means is you're not thinking about what you're doing it, you're just doing it. You're not consciously thinking through this thing. I think there's a lot of players, to your point, who are right in the middle of conscious competence, which, yeah, we're good enough, but it's like, what should I do? Should I go there? But what did he say? He said too late. Mm-hmm. And those moments are instead of just playing the game and having those freedoms, that's a hard place to get if you are overcomplicating the game for these guys. So, and I can tell you from, I think, and anybody listening to this who's played the game at any level, just take the best goal you've ever scored and say to you, and most of the time in that celebration or that moment of surprise or whatever is, how the hell did I just do that? Is usually your first afterthought. Now, that's because you weren't thinking when you did it. And that's why you did it. Because if you would have thought about it, that one's going over the bar, or you missed it completely, or you missed the moment, you missed that second. And that's what I think you're alluding to. And I think that there's something there because I know how much work that staff does, Gregg Berhalter and his staff. All you had to do is see the warm-up for the Gold Cup final. And when you realize that there are more people in red jerseys who are not players than players. There's 40 people out there who are doctors, trainers, psychologists, assistant coaches. They're all over the place. And every single one of them is having a conversation with a player. It's too much. It's way too much. And I think that you can see it from my perspective when you've played. I mean, if I get it. I mean, the psychologists, they want to have a conversation with the assistant coaches, want to tell you where you're supposed to be, and the head coach has got his opinion, and then there's other people weighing in. That's not the way I play, dude. We worked on this all week. Leave me alone. It's game day. Leave me alone. I know what I'm supposed to do. I don't see that in this team. So sometimes they do look a little stagnant because they almost get into these freeze modes where they're thinking way too much.
I have my thoughts on it. It might be too long for this episode. I'll finish up with my thoughts on this very quickly. It's every coach has a lot of instructions, right? There's different ways to put an instruction in a player's head. It can be through drills, simulations that the player naturally just gets it. It becomes a habit. Or it can be from me going to you, Eric, I want you to play here and go there, here and go. That doesn't work because it's going to drive you crazy in the game. You're going to be thinking of that. Pep Guardiola specifically, he does that total football positional play style, and he divides his training right in drills. I think it's something that goes all the way back from La Masia. And when you do those drills, you're simulating situations where the players just kind of like fall into it when the game's happening. They're not thinking about it. So I don't know if Gregg has the great idea, because I know Gregg understands the game and he has the idea. What I question Gregg, and I hope he proves all of us wrong and gets everything going and whatever it is that he can implement that idea. He can get it to go because he does have players. I wouldn't say to walk over CONCACAF. We know the toughness of the away games. We know the teams are not a joke anymore. So
that's a big problem.
Yeah, but I do think he has the quality players to qualify to the World Cup with a little bit less drama and stop giving us some heart attacks.
Yeah, it's not easy. Implementing a system of play is and having ideas and having a plan are all relevant. But I think in the way I coach is I coach through principles. I teach principles. Those principles apply in all scenarios. Going back to Pep, I think one of the things that I enjoy from him, and one of the keeping it simple when I talk to players, is understanding what your position needs to be immediately when we lose the ball, right? But understanding where the ball needs to be when we have it. And that's two thoughts that there's multiple principles that can be applied there. But if you keep those two thoughts in your head, where do I need to be? Where do I need to be? Where's the ball need to be? Who's in the best position to advance the ball immediately? Those are things that players can implement on their own. And those are movements, and that's not a coach being a joystick, but those are movements. Once they're understood and the principles are understood, then the team can have success. So it's all relevant. I mean, it's tough. This game is complicated. Coaches should be working on uncomplicating it to make sure that their players play better.
100% agree, and that'll do for this episode here. Before we go, Eric, or Mr. Wynalda, whatever way you want to prefer to call him, one question: 2026 World Cup. Do you think after that World Cup, soccer in America will arrive, or has soccer already arrived? It already arrived, but after 2026, does it explode?
We're already skipping a World Cup. Why are you doing that? I still think this team has the chance to do something really special in only a couple of months' time. So that's step one. But I think by the time we get to 2026, it's an impossible question to answer about how the reaction will be. But I will be in the minority here. And I think one of the biggest things that we need to do as a soccer nation especially, and this is not going to be a popular thing that I'm about to say, is that I mentioned earlier, married to mediocrity. We need to have a culture of winning. We need to understand that this isn't about development. All right, that we have to teach how to win the game. Win the game you're in. That overriding, you cannot be married to mediocrity and complain that we don't succeed at the highest level when incrementally we've been telling everybody it's okay to lose. We lost 5-0. Yeah, but we learned something today. That's
Stop giving ninth place trophies.
participation trophies,
Yeah.
and telling people that it's okay. I mean, when my kid comes home with a C minus, I don't tell him that's okay. We'll get him next time. I say, why did you get a C minus, and how do we improve your grade? Because that's not acceptable. That doesn't make me, that doesn't make me a bad dad. Or people are too afraid to be critical sometimes, and they want to say it's okay to lose. The only reason why that is in this country, and I hope we grow up by 2026, is because people are paying to play. And they're going to stop paying to play if you keep telling them that their kid sucks. And that it's not okay to win. And so when you do that, people and the industry that has been created, people don't want to be paid, or they don't want to pay money to be told that they're not good at something. So we, as a society, as an industry in soccer, tell people, no, it's okay. We're learning something. We're developing. But the first time that your credit card doesn't hit, they're the first ones to call you and say that we need your payment. So it's a problem.
So that does it for this episode. I want to thank you once again for coming along. This was actually lots of fun, and time flew by while recording this.
Right.
Thank you very much.
You got it. We'll do it again.